I'm here in sunny Shipley with Andy Ace Harrison. Also, he's Mr. Mini, he's Mr. Mini Racer, he's Mr. Mini Rebuild and Restorer. And we are here in association with McVitie's Jaffa Cakes, are we not? I mean, you have a strange association with Jaffa Cakes, but we'll come to that later. Andy, welcome to the Backseat Driver Radio Show with It's Me, Mike Stone.
Mark, it's really good to be here. I'm glad you came over to not so sunny Shipley.
I mean, how did all this come about? Because, I mean, we're in your workshops and the minis, there's no shortage of minis around here, is there?
No, there's no shortage of minis. How this came about is, as a teenager, I joined a local motor club and everybody had minis. And it's like anything else. If they all had Beetles, I'd probably into Beetles or Cortinas or Fiat 500s, whatever. But the Mini was the mainstay of motorsport at that period of time. And we've just gone on this magical journey. As you two said, they go on musical journeys. I'm on a motorsport journey.
Now, the interesting thing was, before we went on air, we were having a quick chat. When you were asked by your careers officer at school, what do you want to be, you were berated for it, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I ended up doing detention. He turned around to me and says, what do you want to do for a living when you leave school next week? I said, I want to be a racing driver and prep race cars. And I got 2 weeks detention for that.
And this led on to the fact that not long after that, you were able to walk back into his office and put something in front of him that proved that you actually did succeed in becoming what you wanted to do.
Yeah, put a signed contract from Alfa Romeo under his nose when I was racing at Monza. So, to be fair to him, he congratulated me. He sort of were a bit sorry about it. But what's happening with it is it's to teach kids that should follow the dreams. And I'm a great believer in taking, especially troubled kids, and they've got a dream and they want somewhere to go, and I help them.
Now, from your early days, I mean, you're, shall we say, internationally known for minis. I mean, how did all this come about? I mean, as you said, you were into minis as a kid because everybody was. What is the story of Andy Ace Harrison?
Well, the story is I came from a family that wanted into cars. My dad were a jockey, so my competitive nature comes from my dad, but he had no interest in cars whatsoever. So a lad moved in our area when I was about 12 years old, and his dad moved from Leicester, and he was a big mini man. And he did minis up, and I learnt how to work on them. And this journey with minis started there. And they call him Graham Brayshaw, and I always hold him responsible, highly responsible for this journey that I've been on.
So, from the early days, how did you talk us through from the early days to where you are now?
Wow, well, it's been, when you look back, and I'm sure you're the same, you look back on your journey and it seems like at the time when you're thinking about it, it's 2 minutes, when it is actually, it's just such a magical journey. You start off as a kid, you ain't got, I won't say the word I'm going to use, you ain't got any money in your pocket and you're running around in bangers and you're keeping them going, you're doing motorsport on the budget, but then I started it as a business, and you start getting customers in, and then customers want you to drive their cars. Then you start going to Europe, then you start going to America, then you start winning races. And then the local mini magazines got involved, and the local press got involved, the local radio, media, and it grew from there to the point where we are now. We have our own media channels. We've got people like yourself who want to come and interview us. And we really like talking about our story because it proves if you've got a dream and you've got some drive, you can achieve things.
Now, I mean, you race the old Mini, what I call the proper Mini. No, that if BMW are listening and you're involved with those guys, they won't be right pleased by this. But I've often said to BMW, by the way, can I tell you what the word Mini means? I mean, I don't know if there's a direct translation into German, but you can feel like saying, do you know what the word Mini means? They are, the little Mini, the original Mini, it's an iconic car, and they are still a phenomenal racing car. But for a lot of people, it's the classic car, it's their everyday car. What is it about minis the proper Mini with the Isigonis design?
Can I tell you what it is about a Mini? It's really simple. You can get in a Mini, you go see the Queen at Buckingham Palace, or you go down to your local pub for a drink. A Mini is such an inoffensive car, it's such a classless car. It don't matter whether you're a millionaire or whether you're just starting out on your journey like I did, a Mini will always fit in. There's not a lot of cars you can say that. Whenever I'm in traffic and you're trying to go through traffic, you're trying to get into traffic, somebody will always let a Mini out with a smile and a wave. If I sit in my BMW Mini, I can't get out of that junction. They won't let me out. You try to fight your way out. And that's the thing about the classic Mini.
And I mean, there must have been millions of them. How many? I mean, roughly how many minis survive? I mean, there's still a lot about, but I mean, it's got to be far less than there used to be.
Well, they made over 6 million of them, and I reckon a conservative sort of estimate would be around 2 million are still around. And that's why you've got people like ourselves with us businesses. It's not just me. There's Mini Sport, there's Mini Spares, all running phenomenal businesses out of the Mini. And what you find now, the customer market is it's all people our age that have got a bit of disposable income, and they'll spend it on the classic Mini.
And of course, the ultimate Mini is the Mini Cooper. And where we're sat at the moment, there's not exactly a shortage of Mini Coopers. I mean, how did the Cooper come about?
Well, the Cooper came about is because John Cooper, and fortunately I'm sort of friendly with the family, had this idea that he could put a tuned engine into a Mini. And he went to Alec and went, look what we've produced. We've put this engine in a Mini, and it's got whatever 90 horsepower or whatever, and go out. And Isagonis want for it, the BMC want for it. But fortunately, John Cooper pushed forward, and they only meant to make like 25,000 of them. And it went on for 10 years. And it was only when BMC or its incarnation at that point decided they weren't paying royalties anymore. So they turned it from a Cooper S into a 1275 GT. Because John Cooper were on £2 a car for every Cooper that were produced. But without them realising it, they nearly killed the Mini. Because the Cooper was the attachment. It wasn't the word Mini, it was the Cooper. Everybody wanted a Cooper, and they still do. People aren't as interested in normal Minis as they are in the Cooper and the Cooper S brand. And you've really got to thank John Cooper for that sort of side of the Mini.
The Coopers came in a variety of engine sizes, didn't they? Because there's, to the Cooper aficionado, there's ones to have, and there's some a bit more desirable than others. So, I mean, just talk us through the engine sizes of the Cooper.
Well, you start when the Mini Cooper first came out with 997. It had small disc brakes. They had this new idea that we'll have the disc brakes, which were far too small to work properly. They then went to a 998. And then you got the Cooper S, which was 970 for homologation purposes, the 1071 and the 1275S. And to be fair, everybody wants a 1275S, but the sweetest of the Coopers is the 998 Cooper. And we were on about earlier when you first arrived about today's driving culture. If you get yourself a nice little 998 Cooper to drive around in, you'll have a car that everybody's looking at and is beautiful to drive.
The one thing I will say is, you raced them. The British Touring Car Championships last year at Drystone, it was a bit of a, shall we say, a bit of a one-off in many ways, but they had two mini races, two proper mini races. There's the Mini Miglias, I think it was the Mini 7s, and the crowds were absolutely transfixed. The television audience figures went off the top of the chart. I mean, it was absolutely staggering to watch the proper minis race. I mean, what is it about racing minis, and how do you race a mini? Because there looks to be a very definite technique to racing one of these.
Yeah, there is a technique. Well, you've got to remember, think of a Mini as a brick, and you throw it into the air. So there's a technique when you're racing. You don't want to be the front of the grid of cars on the next to last lap. You want to be in front of all them guys with 2 corners to go, and you've half a chance of winning. That Mini 7, the Mini 7 Mini Miglia race at Thruxton, I watched. And that's probably one of the best races, not best mini races, one of the best races I've ever seen in my life. You had guys as low down as 7th could have won that race with 3 corners to go. Touring cars is my favourite form of modern day motorsport. I mean, what they do and what they've achieved is incredible. But that Mini 7 race, they're wanting it back. The crowds want that race back. And it was just incredible to watch. I come from Miglia racing. And them cars at the time, back in the 90s, were called the mini touring car. So they used to take them to magazines and test drive them. And drivers used to get out. There were current touring car drivers at the time they get out and said, that's just like my touring car. And that's how good them minis are.
I mean, you commented, and other people have said to me, when you watch the racing, to win in a mini race, you don't want to be at the front with, say, a couple of laps to go. What is the theory behind this? Because everybody won't want to be leading. I mean, what is the theory behind not entering this last couple of laps in the lead?
When you're in a normal saloon car race, which you'll know from my historics, it doesn't matter that you're in front, you're defending like mad. But when you're in a mini race, you let the guy go. So if he's coming past you, you don't try and defend it, because 2 cars go quicker than 1. So you want him in front of you, and you attach yourself to his rear bumper, and the pair of you go quicker together because of the hole that you're cutting in the air. And it really is last man standing when you get to the last two corners. And when you're in the seat, the only way to describe that, it's the best seat in the house. You know, it's great for the spectators, but as a driver, it's so incredibly exciting to be in that position when you think, am I going to do it? Am I going to do it? You know, you just can't beat it.
And I think that's the other thing. I mean, when you watch, if you watch historic footage of Minis racing, and you watch them now down at Goodwood, a well-driven, shall we say, a Mini Cooper will humble some seriously larger machines. I mean, they'll like a Jaguar is but nothing to them. A Ford Falcon and a Ford Mustang, well, we'll let you enjoy yourselves up front, but when the time comes, get out of the way because the Mini's coming past. Why can a Mini be so much quicker? Okay, it's down to its driver a lot of the time. If you put somebody who can't drive in one, it's a waste of time. But a Mini with a good driver in it, how can the Mini beat these big cars?
Well, what you've got is a Mini. You've got all sorts. The big American stuff, the big Jaguars, the big Cortinas. It's the weight. It's the driven from, in my eyes, the wrong end, the rear wheels. I'm a front wheel drive specialist. But the Mini was such an inherent good handling car in the first place. With our tweaks, we arrive at corners and we don't brake. So your Mustang and your Cortina and your Jaguar, at 150 metres are hard on brakes, dropping down the gearbox. We're still hard on the throttle. And that what you just said, we're coming. I sit in my seat sometimes and I'm catching them and I'm going, I'm coming, I'm here. And the problem that you've got, what you've got to remember is you arrive at them, and we're over 120 miles an hour now at Goodwood in these minutes, is that when you come alongside a Mustang, a Falcon, big Galaxy, you're halfway down the car, you still haven't got to the driver. So he doesn't know you're there. So he goes turning in. It's not his fault he can't see you, he just forgets he's got a tank behind him. And that's the excitement of historic saloons.
So, I mean, in that case, how do you actually try and ensure the guy knows you're there? Is there a specific, shall we say, point from straight into bend where you think, I've got to do him here, otherwise he's going to turn in and knock me off?
It always starts the corner before, because obviously you're at him, and you know once you get straight, he's off. And there's no what you can do about it. It's 300 horsepower and he's gone. But you're trying to get nearer every lap, and you're working it. That's how hard it is to try and catch these big guys. So when you get towards them, you're probably not going to like this, but we sometimes give them a little love tap on the back wing, just a little rub to let them know. It's like a tap on the shoulder, say, hello, I'm here. And then you go flying down the inside. But invariably, when you come out the corner, he's off again.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, from a spectator, it's exciting. Can you imagine from the driver's seat how exciting this is? I mean, I'll tell you of a race I did at Donington about 10 years ago, where for 15 laps I chased a Galaxy around Donington, where even the marshals were cheering us. And the driver beat me to the line, don't get me wrong, he was a big bear of a man, and he picked me up in the paddock by my waist, picked me up like a carpet, marched me back to his motorhome, and I'm thinking to myself, did I touch him? Did I hurt him? And he dropped me, went in his box, got me a cold beer out, and went, there you go. And that were for 13th and 14th place on the grid. So that shows you how much camaraderie is in the race.
Now, the one thing about the Minis is the engines, and you might not know, but of course Andy will, that a racing Mini engine, a proper one, they don't exactly have a long life under the bonnet of the car, do they? Given 120 mile an hour in a Mini, it's not like we'll just give it a quick blast up to 120 mile an hour. It's a sustained period of time that it's running this. I mean, what is it about the racing engines, and how do you go on? Do you have to take a load of them with you?
Yeah, we always have a spare engine, and Good would expect you to have a spare engine. So if your race ends in qualifying, they don't like you retiring, so we always have a spare engine. You've got to remember these engines are 1.3. They're doing 9,000 revs for half an hour, and the Mini never drops down. Once you're rolling, because you're not braking, you're not really changing gear, they're at 9,000 revs the whole time. These engines are £25,000 plus, and they do 12 hours between rebuilds. 12 to 16 hours, I should say. Now, if I said to my dad, who thought 100,000 mile, a car was worn out in his day, his old Austin 1800, if I told my old man now that these engines are doing 12 hours, he'd be horrified. But that's what race engines are like. I mean, we have 2 or 3 of them at a time, always circulating through rebuilds.
And what exactly goes in a Mini's racing engine that's different from when you used to go to your BMC, your Britty Laley dealer, and potter off in your little 850 mustard coloured one with green vinyl interior? I mean, what's the difference in the engine from the originals?
A lot of it's down to balance. A lot of it's modern day materials. What we're blessed with now is, as motorsport progressed, that the historics followed route with all these modern day materials. So you've got fancy cranks, fancy rods, forged pistons, the heads are magnificent, they're all CNC machine now. I mean, you're talking back in the period when John Rhodes were racing a Mini, let's say at Brands Hatch, and he had his 90 horsepower. That was deemed a lot. And we're up 130, 140 horsepower now. And don't forget the 12 hours. I mean, John Rhodes in his day, he'd probably do half a dozen races between engine rebuilds. We don't. Our engines come out after every race, strip down, check everything, put back together again.
And when an engine, shall we say, is like you said, after 12 hours, how much of that engine is reusable?
If you stick to the 12, 16 hour rule, you generally just re-ringing, re-shelling, new oil pump, lap all your valves in, old-fashioned engineering really, and you're just making sure everything's tip-top. So you want all your compressions right, all your leak tests, you make sure your clutch is all right, because your result on the track is in the workshop. When you get to the track, that's where everything's done. I always say to lads, once we make that start line, that's their job done. So it's down to me then. So that's what we do at these rebuilds. You just fine-tuning, you're making sure you're crack testing things, because you don't want to be retiring. I had a bad year last year with retirements, so 25 years of racing, that was my worst year. It was just one of those years, I'm afraid.
And, I mean, besides, shall we say, the established mini racers like yourself, how many people want to get into racing minis? I mean, the showcase at Thruxton the other year, do you get people saying, racing drivers and non-racers, I want to race one of these?
We get quite a lot of that. You're surrounded when you say there's a lot of minis in here. 90% of these minis are here are customers' race cars. And somebody will ring me on a Monday morning and say, right, I want to race at Silverstone in 2 weeks' time. And we prep it, we take the car to the circuit, we maintain it at the circuit for them, we give them driver instruction, bring the car back, and then they get invoiced. So there's quite a lot of that goes on now. They either see it on the telly, or they watch it at Goodwood, or the Silverstone Classic, or Alton Park Gold Cup, as you'll know, local to yourself. And it makes them want to drive, it makes them want to race. But it's not that straightforward. You can't just go from sort of trackside and think on Monday morning I'm going to jump in these minis. And these minis are really tricky to drive flat out.
And I mean, one of the people that you took from, shall we say, thinking he might be able to do it to winning a championship is your fellow Yorkshireman, James Martin, the well-known chef. I mean, just talk us through how that came about, because he originally popped up on television having done the Mia Miglia, attempted to with a Maserati. He bought the make and model of car that was notorious. It never did well in the Mia Miglia, so he went out and bought one, and true to form, it didn't do well in the Mia Miglia. How did all that come about? How did you get him from, shall we say, a novice to winning a championship?
So how we took Chef is, I knew his stepfather really well. He's a big mini man. He has Paddy Hopkirk's ex-rally car 8 Emo, and Pete used to come to a local meeting I went to, and he says, oh, in his words, my lad likes racing. So to be fair, I didn't really know a lot about my lad. And I said, all right. I said, well, we can get him going. And then it obviously transpired it with James Martin, the chef. And give him his due, he is a good driver. So he came and shared my car at probably a season's worth of racing, and he got so hooked we built him a car. So we built him his own car, and we went racing. And then we took him to Brands Hatch to the mini festival that year, and he went from a novice to a race winner. And it was a handicap race where he was in against all the fastest mini in the world, and he got set off. But he's such a tactical driver. He maintained the pace like I told him to, and he took the victory.
So I mean, it's like we said, they're small, they're front wheel drive, they're now extremely powerful little things, and you keep your foot in all the time. How do you teach somebody like James, who's probably been used to driving what you might call a conventional car, brake and everything else, how do you teach somebody like James to drive one of these fast?
Well, you get his foot and you put it flat down on the floor and you tape it to the bulkhead, is really what you're doing. A perfect story of that, he was qualifying at Brands Hatch one year, and he came round a few times, and then he failed to turn up, so I flew up to where he'd pulled off. I said, what's up? He says, the throttle stuck to the floor. He said, when I lifted it, it's slowing down. I went, good, get yourself out there. And he went back out, and obviously we sorted the problem out when he came in. It literally is, the problem with the Mini is in a conventional car, you can lift a little bit and the car will move. When you commit in a front wheel drive car into a fast corner, you're committed. And Jackie Stewart had a perfect saying about taking a corner. He says, you do not floor that throttle until you know you don't have to lift again. And that's the way of explaining a Mini. Once you turn in, you're hard on the throttle. If you lift, the back end will come round. You'll end up in the gravel. You've got to think ahead. You always think 150 yards ahead.
And when you're driving them like that, do they tend to have any, do they tend to oversteer or understeer? I mean, you do watch them and they do appear to be, shall we say, oversteering a bit and drifting and lifting and everything else. I mean, it looks like a completely unique way of driving a car.
They are. If you set the Mini up right, the minute you sort of get ready for the corner and you turn the wheel, the back end will come round on you. But that's what you want. So that's the problem you've got. If you lift, when that back end's come round, you're off. You've got to stay committed all the time. It's the way we set them up. They actually steer around the gearbox, as I call it. That's where its turning point is. So it's like the middle of the gearbox. It turns and off you go. But that's why we circulate really quickly. I mean, the speed traps now at Goodwood, we're all doing 124, 126 mile per hour. In a Mini, that when it were brought out for the district nurse, that we're doing 80.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the old Minis. The one thing is, and I think with what's happening at the moment and everything else, historic motorsport as a whole is gaining more and more and greater momentum. I mean, I look at modern motorsport now and it doesn't have the allure, it doesn't have the interest for me that historic racing has. I mean, you attend Goodwood. You're fortunate. You're one of the few. You're one of the ones who gets to race at Goodwood.
Yeah, yeah.
It is by invitation of his lordship. I mean, what is the allure and passion of historic motorsport?
I think that the allure of historic motorsport is I come from that period of time. A lot of your spectators come from that period of time. If you took a graph of the people that go into Goodwood, I would have said you're from anywhere from sort of 40 to early 80s. The modern motorsport's disappeared. It's all about checkbook size. It's all about who's financing who to get where they're going. It's not about the driver. Don't get me wrong, historic motorsport has grown considerably in cost over the last 10 years, but there's still the appeal of seeing old cars racing. So no, the fact that we're further forward on the grid lap time, we still look like the cars from the 60s. We're just going quicker, if you understand what I mean by that.
And the other thing is, especially when you watch Goodwood, the number of what you call modern racing drivers and drivers of modern cars, especially BTCC, things like that, who are now driving historic cars. Is there an increasing interest from the modern racing driver into driving old cars?
What you find with your touring car drivers, and we've been fortunate we've run 2 or 3 in our cars, is that their job is to race touring cars. So like anybody else's job, it comes with pressure. They've got salaries that they're having to prove they can drive. Every time they get in the car, even though they're enjoying it, it's a job. So what we find, they get in our cars and it's great fun. At the moment, we've got Sam Tordoff, the touring car driver, and I've never seen him get out of a car with a bigger smile than when he gets out of the historics.
And besides the Minis, of which we've said there's no shortage of around here, what other historic cars do you look after? Because there's a very, very nice Saab rally car sat outside. And, I mean, the great thing is about today, not only is my Morgan in your car park, but there's another Morgan on the ramp. So at least you've got 2 decent cars knocking about you. What other cars do you look after? And besides the Minis, what other cars or which other cars do you enjoy driving and do you rate as much as the Minis?
I love driving the Mini, but I'm a person who likes to think outside the box, so I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm fortunate that I get to drive Alfa Romeos for Alfa Romeo. We've got single-seaters that we drive. I own one and we've got customer ones. I've been fortunate enough to drive Ferraris at various events for Ferrari. Like you've noticed, we've got a Saab outside. My motorsport started in road rallying and historic rallying in its early forms, so we prep stuff. So we're not a one-trick pony business. We do rallying, we do racing, and if you come at me with 4 wheels, an engine and a steering wheel, I can prep it.
And another very interesting car sat outside is an Ogle. Now, I stood there, I think it's probably my age, and I looked at it, I thought I know what that is. I'm going to have to ask you what it is, because for the life in me, I couldn't remember what it was. Ogle designed the famous Reliant Scimitar. They were a design house, but I mean, that is a unique Ogle, isn't it?
It is a unique Ogle. It's an SX1000, but with a 1293 FIA engine in it. You will have noticed it's got a full cage in it, and the eagle-eyed of you who are here today will have noticed it's left-hand drive. And the reason it's left-hand drive is Sir John Whitmore, who was really famous in touring cars in period, took the car to America because they were going to take America by storm with these cars. So he used it as a demonstrator where he was racing and living over there. Unfortunately, David Ogle, that founded the company, unfortunately lost his life in a Ogle on his way to Brands Hatch. It's quite a well-known story, that. But the Ogle, if you realise where it come from, the floor pan is Mini. So it was like they cut the rotten body off a Mini, and you had this beautiful floor pan, and they brought this lovely tailored suit in the shape of an Ogle and shoved it on it. But that happens to be a race car, that one, and it's quite a rare car.
And you mentioned like it's a mini floor pan. I mean, there was the Wolseley Hornets, the Riley Elf. I noticed on your social media, I think there was a Midas knocking around. I mean, there's quite a lot of cars that if you take away their pretty bodywork, is a Mini. I mean, what else? How many cars did the Mini act as the donor for?
Oh, it's unbelievable. There's a chap from Holland called Jeroen Borge who's brought out a book to do with these cars. He's on his 3rd edition. So that'll give you an idea. These books aren't thin. There's cars coming out of the woodwork everywhere. The Marcus became the Midas, and I've got the prototype and the very first one and the factory-built gold. The Midas as a car is the thing that takes me away from my business. It's my hobby. They sit in my garage and I go for a ride in them. What I really like about kit cars of that period, it's when you'll remember when you drove around streets, people worked on the cars. You don't see that anymore. They've got the bonnet up, they've got the axle stands out, and they maintain their own cars.
I mean, there's something about the Mini, the periods, like you said, there's something about the Mini. Everybody I knew, well, I mean, I used to own Minis, and the first thing I used to do, and you've already mentioned them, was go to Mini Sports in Padiham. I'd buy the plastic distributor shield because the cardboard one that was supplied used to disintegrate. And the other thing I'd do, I'd buy a steering column dropper. I used to drop it by about 1.5 inches, so I didn't feel like I was driving a truck. I mean, do these things still exist, all these little tweaks for Minis?
Well, we run a shop based on things like that, where we've manufactured things to make yourself more comfortable. The Mini was a small car, people forget that, but it used to carry a family of 4, picnic hampers, dog, pram. We turn them into race cars now, and you can barely get anything in them once we've got the race seat in. So we have bespoke drop brackets, bespoke gear levers, different brake pedal assemblies. The Mini is still a magnificent car for somebody who wants to modify it, and people still do, but they do it in a different way. They do it more period using modern parts, so they make them a safe car in effect.
I mean, the interesting thing is, I mean, they were very, very popular in Japan, and some of the latter Minis didn't have the external seams, and you can now, if memory serves, you could actually either get an old style shell with external seams, or somebody was once telling me you could get a set of seams to stick on.
Yeah, you could do that. There was a big thing in the late 60s, early 70s, a special Neville Trickett, who were actually making them into sprints, so they were chopping a bit out the pillars, chopping a bit out the bottom, which was an excessive job. And they take the seams off to get rid of that drag coefficient. But then I've just done one of cells so that people then don't want the D-seam look, so you've then got to put the seams back on. It's not quite as simple as sticking seams on like they did in period. Now we have to use new panels and put a panel to get the seams back. But it's amazing. We've noticed in Minis, especially me who's been in them a long time, that fashions change. So we've gone from wide wheels to back seats being ripped out to things going back to factory spec. And we're now seeing a slight change that we're going into the cafe racer route where they look like these cars you're seeing at Goodwood, but the families are going to watch the events in them, which is what they've done in period. You were asking me about our works van, and we restored it very much with the look that if in 1963 I wanted to go watch a race at Brands Hatch, that's how my van would look.
I mean, that's the one thing you were saying. You were asked by Goodwood, can we borrow your minivan? I mean, that gave you some serious exposure. I mean, it became a delivery van.
Oh, it was amazing. We took it. It was our paddock van, so we parked it at the side at race car. And I've got to be honest, I were a little bit cheeky where I parked it, and I got the call from Goodwood, and they says, "Is that your minivan?" Parked up, and I thought I were in for a bit of ear bashing. I went, "Yeah, it is. Do you want me to move it?" They went, "Move it? No, we want to borrow it." And they borrowed it. They filled it full of sandwiches and orange juice. It was a hot day, and they went round the whole circuit feeding the marshals. Well, our car is sign written. So I said, "Would you mind?" I said, "Mind?" I said, "There's 100,000 people out there. I'd love you to do it."
If somebody wants to buy, not so much a racing Mini, but an ordinary Mini, when I say, no, I know you were involved with them, but the proper Mini, how much would a Mini cost you these days? Just a standard one, not one that the Ace himself has worked on.
Well, give you a wide spectrum. Obviously, you come from the same era as me, where you went and bought a £250 Mini and you had 2 years worth of motoring and you go anywhere in it. Them days are gone. You know, a base level now for a Mini is around £3,000, and that'll be something you need to extensively restore, which is what people want to do. But you've got to bear in mind, they go right through the spectrum. Some of these original Cooper S's now are fetching £50,000 to £70,000. Our own race cars and as new builds are £50,000 to £70,000. And don't forget that the Mini that appeared at Matthewson's at the auction that turned up on a crate and had changed shape, and that was £20,000.
And I mean, like Matthewson's, do they still appear in Boynes from time to time?
Well, Matthewson's favourite advert was that Mini I'm telling you about that said you'll never find another. And this coming Saturday they've got an auction with a Barn 5 Mini that looks just like that one.
I mean, they are a fascinating little car. I think they're absolutely fantastic. But before we go, we must return to your favourite comestible. And we are surrounded by them here. McVitie's Jaffa Cake. Apparently you have a sponsorship deal with McVitie's. I don't, if you're listening, McVitie's Jaffa Cake. How does the Jaffa Cake saga come about?
Right, well, I'm going to spin this on you at the end of this conversation, but we was doing some filming for My Supercar Productions, and their final question, which is what I'm going to throw at you in a minute, they said to me, if you were a biscuit, what sort of biscuit would you be? And I said, well, I'd be a Jaffa Cake, because I'm crispy on the top, I'm soft underneath, and I'm really tasty in the middle. And he just laughed, and Jaffa Cake had been sending them by the bucket load. What sort of biscuit would you be?
It'd have to be a Viscount. Very, very elegant, very, very tasty, and only for the truly sophisticated.
Are you sure?
I know I'm in Yorkshire. I've lowered my standards. I mean, you've probably heard my radio show before. My tagline is, yes, it's me, Mike Stone, Yorkshire's favourite Lancastrian. I mean, there is one thing I've always said, this isn't correlated. Yorkshire folk and Lancashire folk enjoy, shall we say, this technically not getting on. But the one thing we're always agreed on, at least we're not down south.
Well, we're great northern folk, aren't we? We speak as mind. We say as we think. I just want to know how you got over the border with your passport, because I put a border control on and I didn't think you'd get here this morning. But anyway.
Well, it's being run by the same lot that do it down south. I mean, nobody's bothering doing anything. The oddest country to get in at the moment is Wales, apparently. Now, the one thing is, and we shall give this a shameless plug, we are here today because what are we doing?
Well, we're doing some filming. We have this YouTube channel that we run under the tag of Andy Ace Harrison. And having seen your video footage and listened to your radio show, and I've got to say, I think you do a great job. I had this idea to add to our filming that we get the great late, always late Steve Berry, yourself along, and we'd have a bit of banter. And we're going to do a programme from his workshop today, and it's no holds barred, say as you see, talking about cars and bikes.
And we're hoping this will become a regular thing, to a degree, slightly in association with my radio show.
Well, that's what we want, because you do a great job. We're hearing that we're doing great things. I really like Steve Berry and what he does, and I just think between...
When he turns up.
I don't even know if he's coming today, but he's a diva, and we can live with divas. But I'm hoping that we can create something. We're going to evolve it around food, cars, banter. It's not going to be like your typical car driving programme where you say what it does to gallon and how fast it goes. It is literally going to be saying what you think about the vehicle.
Andy Ace Harrison, it's been a pleasure coming over to sunny Shipley, or not so sunny Shipley. It's raining. I mean, it's been glorious weather all week. I've been driving around in my Morgan, looking the part. I've had to put the top up this morning to come here. But it's been a pleasure having you on the Backseat Driver radio show. Andy, thanks very much indeed. And I look forward to you joining me once again.
I look forward to it, and thanks.
Thanks very much, Andy.